Hello, my name is Veronica Napoli. I'm here with the NBC Newsroom. Our next story today is going to be the 20th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, which is also known as the Gentle Revolution. This extraordinary story of the students collectively coming together was one of the most important events in all of Czechoslovakia. What makes this movement so unique is that it focused on the denial of freedoms rather than the corruption of the people. After 50 years of being under control of the Nazi regime and lacking freedom, the overall goal of the students was to overthrow the Communist Party with a nonviolent approach. This historical event started on November 17, 1989, when Jan Opětal, one of the Nazi leaders, died. It was then that over 150,000 students joined a nonviolent protest in Prague and demanded for a democratic reform. Police tried to stop the students, who were singing and shouting, "We have bare hands," smiling and giving the police flowers. Unfortunately, police wouldn't tolerate the student protest and beat over 200 students that day. Overall, this revolution quickly gained momentum, and what is so captivating about this revolution is that it only lasted 10 days. Successfully, the students were able to relinquish the communist regime and create an ideal democratic society that eventually sparked many other nations in Europe to do the same. So right now we're going to go on a one-on-one personal interview with Lauren Valley and one of the original students from Prague who was actually there that day. So Lauren, here you go.
Thank you, Veronica. I'm Lauren Valley, here with Mikhail Havlicek, one of the original student demonstrators from the Velvet Revolution. Thank you for being with us, Mikhail. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep, my name is Mikhail Havlicek, and I'm 43 years old, and I attended Charles University in Prague, and I was actually a student at the student protest at the time.
So, Mikhail, can you tell us how the protest began?
Yeah, it all started on November 17th, 1989, and it was actually 50 years from the day in which the Czech students held demonstration against the Nazis, which were occupying Czechoslovakia. And on this anniversary, the students were again in Prague. They were protesting another oppressive regime. And the protest actually started off as a commemoration of the death of Jan Opětal, but instead it went to a demonstration for democratic reforms. And on their way to the Czech National Cemeteries, police stopped the students, and the students actually offered them flowers, but the police responded with violence and then beat them with clubs. And 167 were apparently injured, and one was actually pronounced dead.
So, although the death you mentioned was proven false some days later, how do you think Martin Schmidt's death really affected the outturn of events?
Schmidt's death caused an already unstable crowd to turn into a revolutionary mob, and hundreds of thousands of people came to defend their children, their rights, and order the communist leader Miloš Jakeš to resign. 50 years later, after the German occupation, 20 years after the Prague Spring uprising, the Velvet Revolution had begun.
So it seems like a lot has changed in the 20 years since 1989. What do you think is the biggest?
No, I'd say the biggest change is obviously the fact that Czechoslovakia is no longer around. It's split up into the Czech and Slavic republics.
Great. And that, of course, was a direct response to the Velvet Revolution, and it's termed the Velvet Divorce.
Yeah, even the national anthem was split into two. The Czechs get the first part and the Slavics get the second part.
How clever. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
B.
Today, we've reflected on the quick and relatively smooth transition between Czechoslovakia's communist regime and the democratic and capitalist-based society established by former President Václav Havel. Although the Central European nation no longer exists, we can learn how revolutions can and should be won, and what student revolution can mean for people today. This movement that took place in 1989 is very unique and special, since historically, revolutions of this magnitude usually go hand in hand with fighting. Because of the peacefulness of the students involved, it was named Velvet, as the revolution went as smoothly as this type of material. Through the eyes and actions of the Czechoslovakian revolutionaries, we can see that liberty will always owe youth. If we were to identify one of the real adversaries of freedom, it would certainly be student indifference. Although the entire movement lasted only 10 days in 1989, it still remains the ideal type of revolution. non-violent, anti-utopian protests based not on a single class, but on broad social coalitions, characterized by the application of mass social pressure and the power of the people to bring the current power holders to negotiate and ultimately surrender. The students aim not to terrorize but compromise, which is what makes this the ideal model revolutionaries today should try and emulate. Students in the world today need to grasp what is happening by looking at lessons learned, as well as the success of what happened 20 years ago. The overthrow of the country's communist leadership perhaps comes closest to the ideal democratic revolt, which also sparked other Eastern European nations to follow in the Czechoslovakians' footsteps. Finally, in June of 1990, less than 1 year after the Velvet Revolution began, Czechoslovakian students and citizens elected Havel to be president, marking the first democratic elections since 1946.
On November 17th, 1989, when 50 years from the day... Wait, you made a weird noise!
Story, we will actually get up and... Oh, crap. I don't know why.
Wait, no, keep going. Just say, thanks, Mikhail.
Oh.
I wonder if it's good quality.
This extraordinary student... Oh, why is this so difficult?
Student demonstrators, could you tell us a bit about them?
Yeah. Most of the...
Sorry.
I didn't know.